picture the year 1995. You are the executive of a massive, globally dominant record label. And your entire business model, like the very foundation of your competitive advantage, it relies on this sprawling, incredibly expensive physical infrastructure.
Right, a massive physical footprint.
Exactly. You employ armies of A&R reps to physically scour clubs in different cities. You book these, hugely expensive specialized recording studios. You manage complex supply chains just to secure the polycarbonate plastic needed to press millions of physical CDs.
And then I suppose you have to coordinate fleets of trucks to ship those discs to brick-and-mortar stores all across the globe.
You do. You control the scarcity, you control the distribution, and therefore you control the billion-dollar profit pool of the entire music industry. But then, seemingly overnight, a handful of college kids with a dial-up internet connection and like a basic understanding of audio compression, they begin uploading digital files to a server.
Ah, the beginning of the end for the old guard.
Literally. They bypass your scouts, your studios, your pressing plants, your delivery trucks. They completely subvert a monolithic physical supply chain for absolute pennies, delivering the exact same core value, the music, directly to the consumer.
It is a terrifying scenario if you're that executive.
It really is. So, welcome to this session of the Pocket MBA. If you are an ambitious MBA student or, a business manager or strategic leader looking for a practical shortcut to mastering the mechanics of strategy without getting completely bogged down in impenetrable academic jargon, you are in exactly the right place.
Spot on. The scenario you just described perfectly encapsulates the existential threat that arises when a management team fundamentally misunderstands its own value creation logic.
Yeah, they didn't know what business they were actually in.
Precisely. And we have designed today's class to be both a rigorous intellectual exercise and, crucially, a highly practical toolkit for avoiding that exact fate.
What's the game plan for today?
Well, over the next 40 minutes or so, our syllabus is divided into two distinct halves. The first half will be devoted to dissecting the foundational theories of value configuration. We were going to deconstruct the traditional physical chains, then transition into the problem-solving environments of shops and the interconnected ecosystems of networks.
And then we go digital, right?
Indeed, we'll venture into the virtual digital realm. Then, the second half of our discussion will function as a highly practical step-by-step masterclass. We will examine exactly how you, as a manager, can apply these analytical tools to your own teams on Monday morning.
Using actual real-world case studies to, illuminate the path forward.
Quite right. Moving from the high-level theoretical why directly into the ground-level how.
Love it. Okay, so to understand how a digital network subverts a physical supply chain, we kind of have to start by understanding the architecture of that physical chain itself.
We do. We must start at the absolute bedrock of modern strategic analysis.
Right, which means delving into Michael Porter's classic value chain theory. This was first articulated back in his 1985 book, Competitive Advantage.
Porter's framework completely revolutionized how we analyze a business. Prior to this, many executives viewed their firm as a somewhat opaque, monolithic entity.
Like a black box.
Exactly. A black box where capital and labor went in one side and finished products and revenues just sort of popped out the other. The underlying theory of Porter's value chain, which is deeply rooted in microeconomics, dispels this notion entirely.
It breaks it all down.
It demands that we view the firm not as a single organism, but as a complex collection of discrete yet fundamentally interrelated activities.
So instead of looking at a company and simply saying, they manufacture running shoes, this model forces a manager to break down every single microscopic action required to conceptualize, fabricate, and sell that specific shoe.
We are mapping the anatomy of the firm.
Right. And the ultimate strategic goal of mapping that anatomy is to pinpoint the exact locations where your firm generates its actual competitive advantage.
Yes. Porter posited that if a firm wishes to achieve above-average profitability, it must optimize its discrete activities to pursue one of two fundamental generic strategies. The first of these is cost leadership.
Okay. Cost leadership. Let's unpack that.
This strategy involves delivering the same or highly comparable value to the customer as your competitors, but doing so at a structurally lower cost. This is typically achieved through relentless operational efficiency, process innovation, and the leveraging of massive economies of scale.
So the cost leader just strips out the friction. Like, they dominate market share because their underlying cost structure allows them to offer lower prices while maintaining their margins.
Or they charge the industry average price and simply pocket a massive margin because their internal processes are so ruthlessly optimized.
That makes sense. And what's the second strategy?
The alternative generic strategy is differentiation. Here, the firm is not primarily focused on being the cheapest producer. Instead, the firm seeks to create uniquely superior value for the customer by delivering a product or service with highly distinct, desirable features.
Right, like a luxury car or a high-end smartphone.
Precisely. Because the market perceives these features as unique and valuable, the firm can command a premium price. The strategic balancing act here involves achieving this premium pricing while striving to keep the underlying costs of that differentiation at a manageable level.
So you are either engineering a system to do things cheaper than anyone else, or you are engineering a system to do things so uniquely well that your target demographic will gladly pay a massive premium for it.
That is the essence of it, yes.
Okay, so to actually execute either of these strategies, Porter gives us a structural map. He divides the firm's operations into two broad categories: primary activities and support activities.
Let's really unpack the primary ones first, because these are the sequential, physical steps of value creation.
Yeah, these are the ones that actually touch the product.
Indeed. The primary activities are those directly and tangibly tied to the physical creation, the material transformation, and the ultimate delivery of the product to the end consumer. They follow a highly logical, sequential flow that mimics an industrial assembly line.
Okay, what's step one?
The sequence begins with inbound logistics. This encompasses the entirety of your receiving, inventory management, warehousing, and the internal handling of raw materials.
So this is the bottleneck where supplier unreliability directly hits your operational runway, right? Like, if your inbound logistics are chaotic, it doesn't matter how efficient your factory is, because the machines will just sit idle waiting for parts.
A vital point regarding interdependency, yes. The next sequential step, once the materials are secured, is operations.
The actual making of the thing.
Exactly. This is the core transformative phase. It is the physical conversion of those raw material inputs into the final recognizable product form. Machining, packaging, assembly, equipment maintenance, rigorous quality testing.
The factory floor, basically. Metal being stamped, silicon being etched. And once the transformation is complete, the finished product has to actually go somewhere. Which brings us to step 3.
Outbound logistics. Now that the tangible product exists, this involves collecting, storing in finished goods inventory, and physically distributing that product to the buyers. Material handling, delivery vehicles, order processing.
Right, getting the goods out the door and onto retail shelves, or directly to the consumer. But simply putting a product on a shelf doesn't guarantee someone's going to buy it. We have to create the demand.
Which leads directly into marketing and sales. These are the activities associated with providing a means by which buyers can actually purchase the product, and crucially, inducing them to do so. Advertising, promotions, sales force management, pricing strategies.
We've made it, we've shipped it, we've convinced someone to buy it, but the chain doesn't actually end at the cash register, does it?
No, it does not. The final primary activity is service. This comprises the post-sale support activities designed to enhance, or at the very least maintain, the value of the product over its operational lifespan.
So, like installation, repair, warranties.
Yes, ongoing user training, parts supply, and product adjustment.
Okay, so that is the main linear flow. Inbound to ops, out through outbound, driven by marketing, sustained by service. But as you mentioned earlier, these activities are not isolated silos. They are super interdependent.
Right.
And they require a robust foundational structure to function, which introduces the second half of Porter's model, the support activities.
Support activities play a role that is auxiliary, yet absolutely vital to the survival of the firm. They don't directly touch the core product on the assembly line, but they enable the primary activities to occur efficiently. The first of these is procurement.
Now wait, how is that different from inbound logistics? That confuses people a lot.
It is a critical distinction. Procurement is not the physical handling of the incoming boxes. It is the overarching purchasing function. It is the strategic process of acquiring resource inputs across the entire organization.
Oh, I see. So it's the corporate entity negotiating a massive global contract for raw steel or, essentially purchasing cloud storage for all its different regional brands to get a bulk discount. It is the strategy of buying, not the logistics of receiving.
Spot on. Moving forward, the second support activity is technology development. Now, it's a common misconception to equate this solely with the IT department or a lab full of scientists.
Right, it's broader than that.
Much broader. In Porter's framework, every single value activity, from the way a warehouse is organized to the script a salesperson uses, has a technology or a specific know-how associated with it.
So you could be a logistics company developing a proprietary routing algorithm to save fuel,
Yes.
or a bakery developing a new way to proof dough faster. Both are technology development.
Indeed. The third support activity transcends every single department, and that is human resource management. You have to recruit, hire, train, develop, and compensate the human beings executing both the primary and support activities.
And that ties back to your strategy, right? If you are pursuing a differentiation strategy based on like bespoke, high-quality customer service, your HR management has to be structurally geared towards recruiting highly empathetic, skilled communicators. You can't just fill hourly shifts at the lowest possible wage.
Exactly. The strategy dictates the support structure. Finally, we have firm infrastructure. This encompasses the overarching formal systems that govern the entity: strategic planning, corporate finance, accounting, legal affairs, and the general management structure.
Okay, so we now have a comprehensive map of the internal firm, a beautifully organized sequence of primary activities resting on a foundation of support activities. But the source material points out something managers often overlook: that a single firm rarely does everything. You know, from the raw extraction of materials to the final consumer delivery entirely in-house. Your firm's internal chain is actually just one small link in a much larger macroeconomic chain.
Ah, yes. You are describing the concept of the value system. It is the wider, sprawling set of interorganizational links. Your firm does not operate in a vacuum. You have the value chains of your myriad suppliers feeding vital inputs into your inbound logistics.
Right.
Then your firm's outbound logistics feed into the value chains of distribution channels, wholesalers, retailers, which ultimately deliver the product into the customer's own value chain.
And mapping out this entire macro-level value system is how strategic managers locate what the text refers to as profit pools. Let's talk about those.
Profit pools are a fascinating structural reality of modern industries. They refer to the disproportionate levels of profit available at different stages of the entire value system. This variance is driven by shifting levels of competitive intensity, barriers to entry, and relative bargaining power.
Give me an example of that.
Consider the historical evolution of the personal computer industry. If a manager merely looked at the internal value chain of a company assembling the physical computers, they would miss the broader strategic picture entirely.
Because the real money wasn't in assembling the plastic and the screen.
Precisely the opposite. By mapping the entire value system, one would discover that manufacturing the complex microprocessors, the silicon chips, and writing the proprietary operating system software were inherently far more profitable pools than the highly commoditized, intensely competitive arena of hardware assembly.
Oh, wow. So understanding the topography of those profit pools allows you, as a manager, to strategically position your firm into the most lucrative segment of the wider ecosystem, rather than, fighting a grueling price war in a shallow pool.
Indeed. It directs your vertical integration strategy.
Okay, let's pause our analysis right here, because looking at this classic value chain model, the inbound raw materials, the physical operations transforming them, the outbound shipping, it captures the transformative logic of a manufacturing firm perfectly.
Yes, it does.
It sounds exactly like a literal industrial-era assembly line. It is a highly physical, sequential process. Value is incrementally and visibly added at each distinct station on the factory floor. The sources highlight that this works brilliantly for a company making photocopiers or stamping metal cans.
The transformative sequential logic is the very essence of the industrial economy.
But I want to introduce a major piece of intellectual pushback here, challenging the universal application of Porter's model.
Go right ahead.
Imagine you are the managing director of a large urban hospital. Or perhaps you're a senior partner at a boutique consulting firm. Or a regional retail bank manager. There is no tangible assembly line for curing a patient of a complex illness.
No, there isn't.
There's no factory floor for securing a commercial real estate loan. If I'm forced to map my hospital's complex diagnostic operations into rigid categories like inbound logistics and outbound logistics, it feels fundamentally flawed.
I see where you're going.
Am I treating the sick patient as the raw material? Is a healthy patient the outbound inventory? It just feels like we are forcing a square peg into a round hole, kind of obscuring how value is actually created in a high-level service environment.
That pushback is not only entirely valid, it is the precise catalyst that drove the next major theoretical evolution in strategic management. Your frustration with the manufacturing bias of the value chain mirrors the groundbreaking research conducted by scholars Stable and Filstad, published in their 1998 paper.
Okay, so they saw the same problem.
They did. They recognized the inherent limitations you just articulated. The classic value chain, deeply rooted in a transformative manufacturing logic, is actually just one of three distinct generic value creation logics. By relying solely on the chain model, managers in service, financial, and knowledge-based sectors were severely misdiagnosing their own competitive advantages.
Okay, so if the classic linear chain is only one piece of the puzzle, what are the other two frameworks that we need to internalize?
Stadel and Fieldstad built their alternative models upon the foundational work of James D. Thompson, specifically his 1967 Typology of Organizational Technologies. They introduced us to two radically different models, the value shop and the value network.
Let's look at the internal logic of the value shop first, since that addresses my hospital and consulting examples.
Certainly. The value shop models firms that rely on what Thompson termed an intensive technology. The entire philosophy of value creation here is utterly divorced from transforming raw materials into standardized products. Instead, the firm's purpose is to mobilize highly specialized resources and activities to resolve a unique, specific customer problem.
A unique customer problem. So the raw input isn't a sheet of metal, it is a bespoke challenge.
Exactly.
That's the hospital diagnosing an individual illness. That is the architectural firm designing a custom skyscraper for a unique plot of land, or an engineering company exploring for oil in an unmapped basin.
The variance in the input is infinite because every client's problem is unique. And the defining, underpinning structural characteristic of the value shop is the presence of a massive information asymmetry between the firm and the client.
Information asymmetry. Let's break down the mechanics of that. It essentially means that one party in the transaction possesses significantly more specialized knowledge than the other.
It is the core driver of the shop's value. Consider the dynamic between a patient and a highly trained medical specialist. The patient experiences a problem, a set of symptoms, a sickness, but they fundamentally lack the scientific and clinical knowledge to accurately diagnose the cause, let alone prescribe a viable treatment.
Right. I don't know how to do surgery on myself.
Quite. The physician, through years of specialized training, possesses that knowledge. Because of this vast asymmetry, the firm can deliver immense value to the client, even if the ultimate outcome is simply telling the client that no underlying problem exists.
Oh, wow. Yeah. The doctor delivers value merely by examining you, running the diagnostics, and confirming you're perfectly healthy. You could never know that with absolute certainty without paying for the expert's assessment. The assessment itself is the product.
Precisely. That completely shifts how we view the firm's operations.
So how do the primary activities in a problem-solving value shop differ from the rigid, linear assembly line of Porter's value chain?
They differ fundamentally in their architecture. The activities in a value shop are cyclical, iterative, and spiraling, rather than sequential and linear. The sequence is tailored to the specific nuances of the problem at hand. The primary activities begin with problem finding and acquisition.
Okay, finding the problem.
This involves the initial engagement, the recording, and the formal formulation of the problem. For a medical clinic, this is the intake process, taking the patient's medical history, performing initial diagnostic tests. For a consulting firm, it's the discovery meetings and drafting the scope of work.
Acquiring the client and rigorously defining exactly what is wrong, what's next.
Following the definition of the problem, the firm engages in problem solving. This is the intellectual and analytical core of the shop. It involves generating, analyzing, and evaluating alternative solutions based on the firm's specialized expertise.
The doctor's consulting on different surgical options, or the architect's drafting 3 distinct conceptual designs.
Yes. Once the alternatives are generated, the next primary activity is choice. This is a critical, explicit activity. It is the formal process of choosing among the various alternatives. It represents a major decision point, often requiring collaboration with the client. Which surgery do we proceed with? Which design do we build?
And once a choice is made, we move to the actual doing of the thing.
The fourth activity is execution. This is the mobilization of resources to actually implement the chosen solution. It is the surgeon performing the operation, the petroleum engineers drilling the well, or the consultants implementing the new management structure.
Now, in a traditional value chain, the process would essentially end there, right? The product is shipped. But the value shop has one final crucial step that closes the loop.
The final activity is control and evaluation. Because the firm is dealing with unique, complex problems, they must rigorously measure to what extent the implemented execution actually resolved the initial problem formulated in step one. Did the surgery eradicate the disease? Did the building design meet the load requirements?
And the brilliant part of the cyclical logic is that if the evaluation reveals that the problem was not fully solved, or if a new complication arose, that evaluation stage immediately morphs into the problem-finding stage of a brand new cycle.
The loop begins again.
It's a continuous spiral of learning, adjustment, and applied expertise, completely unlike a rigid sequence on a conveyor belt.
It is the structural difference between a machine and intellect. Now, earlier we established that a primary driver of competitive advantage for a factory chain was massive scale, relentlessly lowering unit costs by pumping out millions of identical products. However, in a value shop, maximizing volume is rarely the path to strategic dominance.
Right, because you aren't selling a standardized commodity, you are selling trust and specialized capability. So the value driver here is structurally different. It is rooted in success and reputation.
Indeed. Success, as it crystallizes into industry reputation and long-term client relationships, is the ultimate currency of the value shop. Clients are facing high-stakes, highly complex problems. They are absolutely not looking for the lowest bidder.
Yeah, a corporate board facing a hostile takeover seeks the legal firm with a reputation for winning unwinnable cases. A patient facing a rare disease seeks the specialized surgeon who has like a 6-month wait list.
The wait list itself functions as a powerful market signal of superior value. It demonstrates that demand for this specific, highly specialized capability vastly outstrips supply. We inherently trust the consultant who is booked out for months over the one who has immediate availability.
Assuming the market demand accurately reflects a higher quality of execution. Okay, so we have the linear, transformative logic of the factory chain and the iterative, problem-solving logic of the professional shop. That brings us to the third framework. What is the architecture of the value network?
The value network models firms that utilize what Thomson categorized as a mediating technology.
Yeah.
Their fundamental logic of value creation is a radical departure from both the transformative chain and the problem-solving shop.
How so?
They do not transform physical inputs into products, nor do they mobilize experts to solve individual client problems. Instead, a value network creates value by facilitating complex exchange relationships among customers who are distributed across space and time.
They are the ultimate connectors. We're talking about a telecommunications provider routing calls between millions of users, or a retail bank acting as the intermediary connecting depositors who have excess capital with borrowers who need capital, or an insurance company pooling risk.
Exactly. The critical defining distinction that a manager must internalize is that the firm itself is not the network. The firm provides a networking service. The customers and their sheer volume are the most vital component of the actual product being sold.
And because the firm is mediating ongoing relationships rather than pushing products down a line, the primary activities don't happen sequentially or cyclically. They have to occur simultaneously in parallel.
Yes. There are three main categories of primary activities that must fire simultaneously. First is network promotion and contract management. This involves the continuous effort of inviting new customers to join the network, evaluating them, and managing the complex web of contracts that govern the service provision.
For a bank, that's the marketing department trying to attract new accounts, simultaneously paired with the risk assessment team evaluating a credit score and the legal team executing a mortgage contract.
Concurrently, the firm must execute the second activity, service provisioning. This is the actual real-time establishment and maintenance of the connection or the mediation.
Routing a phone call across fiber optic cables or digitally processing a massive withdrawal and instantly calculating the updated interest yields.
Precisely. And neither the contracts nor the service provisioning can happen without the third activity running silently in the background, which is infrastructure operation. This is the relentless continuous maintenance of both the physical and the complex information systems required to support the massive scale of mediation.
Maintaining cell towers, running redundant IT switching systems so the network doesn't collapse. And these three categories are totally interdependent. You can't provision a telecom service if the physical cell tower is down, and there's no point in managing contracts if the service can't be provisioned.
Thomson formally refers to this specific type of operational relationship as reciprocal interdependence. And this structure leads to a value driver that is completely unique to the network model, fundamentally different from scale or reputation. The value of a network is driven by positive network externalities.
Okay, let's unpack the underlying mechanism of a network externality for the listeners.
The concept is elegant, but incredibly powerful. A positive network externality dictates that the inherent value of the service to any existing individual customer increases exponentially every single time a new customer is added to the broader network.
Like the early adoption of the telephone.
Quite. A telephone is a remarkably useless piece of hardware if you are the only person on the planet who possesses one. There is no one to call. However, its value increases exponentially as the network density grows. Every new person who installs a telephone exponentially increases your potential avenues for connection.
The customer growth actually improves the product for the people who already bought it. But this interconnectedness introduces a truly fascinating and honestly kind of dangerous paradox regarding operational costs and system value, especially when we compare it to the traditional factory chain.
Ah, yes, the capacity utilization paradox. This is a nuance where many traditional managers fail when pivoting to a network business.
Right. Because in a classic value chain, the industrial factory maximizing your capacity utilization is almost universally a positive strategic goal. It relentlessly lowers your unit costs. If a factory is designed to run 24 hours a day and it operates at 100% capacity, the fixed costs of the building and machinery are spread across the maximum possible number of units, minimizing cost per unit, maximizing profit.
A factory at a 100% capacity is a well-oiled, highly profitable machine.
But a value network at 100% capacity is a complete disaster waiting to happen. The metaphor I like to use is a major highway system. A highway operates as a physical network mediating transportation. If that highway is at 50% capacity, traffic flows smoothly, the network is delivering high value. But if that highway hits 100% capacity utilization, it ceases to be a road and becomes a parking lot.
A brilliant analogy.
The physical space is fully utilized, but no one can actually get to where they're going. The system grinds to a halt, and the value of using that road drops to absolute zero.
Highly accurate. In a value network, driving toward 100% capacity utilization will indeed lower your underlying operational costs per user, but it will simultaneously and catastrophically degrade the actual value of the service you're providing.
If a telecom network attempts to operate at max capacity, the routing switches become overwhelmed, lines jam, calls drop.
Or if a retail bank operates with zero slack and faces 100% liquidity demand from its depositors simultaneously, it suffers a catastrophic bank run and systemic collapse.
Therefore, managing a value network is not about ruthless cost-cutting to maximize capacity. It requires a really delicate strategic balancing act. You have to balance the drive for cost efficiency with the absolute necessity of maintaining enough expensive, idle slack capacity in the system to ensure the service remains functional during unpredictable spikes in demand.
You simply cannot manage a telecommunications firm or a server farm with the exact same industrial cost-cutting mentality you would use for a shoe factory. You will inadvertently destroy the very value you're attempting to optimize.
Okay, we have now established an incredibly robust understanding of the physical world of value creation. We have the linear chain, the bespoke shop, and the mediating network. But I want to push our analysis into the next dimension.
I suspect I know where we are heading.
All of the frameworks we've discussed so far are deeply rooted in physical infrastructure. Hospitals, bank branches, factory floors, copper wires. What happens to competitive advantage when we strip away the physical constraints and enter the purely digital realm, the world of pure information?
That necessary pivot leads us to the highly influential work of Rayport and Sviogla, published in their 1995 paper exploring the concept of the virtual value chain. They posited a fundamental paradigm shift. Every modern business, whether they realize it or not, actually competes simultaneously in two distinct parallel worlds.
The marketplace and the market space, right?
Indeed. The first is the physical world of tangible resources that managers can see, touch, and measure: factories, retail stores, physical inventory. They term this the marketplace. The second is a virtual world, constructed purely of digital information and interconnected data streams, which they termed the market space.
To ground this, purchasing a physical answering machine at a big box electronics store is a transaction occurring in the physical marketplace. But paying your cellular provider a recurring monthly fee for a digital cloud-based voicemail service is a transaction operating entirely within the market space.
The output is similar, but the underlying mechanics are entirely different. And the central thesis for executives is that the processes and logical frameworks for creating value are fundamentally and structurally different in these two worlds. If a manager attempts to create value with pure information in the market space, using the physical transformative steps of a traditional factory chain, they will fail.
So what are the steps for the virtual chain?
Ray Portins-Fiocla identified 5 distinct virtual value-adding steps. To transform raw, chaotic data into a highly valuable digital product, a firm must execute a specific sequence. They must gather, organize, select, synthesize, and finally distribute that information.
Gather, organize, select, synthesize, distribute. It is the process of curating digital chaos into actionable intelligence. But there is a terrifying structural reality underpinning this digital realm that the text highlights, and it poses an existential threat to traditional physical businesses: the law of digital assets.
It is a concept that fundamentally upends traditional economic models. Unlike physical, tangible assets, a lump of raw coal, a sheet of industrial steel, a physical textbook digital assets are not used up in their consumption.
Right. When a dealership sells a physical car, that SMEThic inventory is gone. They must physically build or acquire another one to generate another sale. But when a software company sells a digital program or a media company licenses a digital photograph, they retain the exact same pristine original asset.
The inventory is never depleted.
And this leads to a massive question regarding strategic pricing and market competition. If these digital assets are never consumed upon use, and the marginal cost to replicate and distribute a digital file is essentially zero, doesn't that completely obliterate traditional pricing models?
It creates an almost insurmountable paradigm-shifting challenge for legacy firms.
For centuries, pricing has been fundamentally based on the cost of raw material consumption and physical labor. How on earth does a legacy company compete when a digital upstart's marginal cost for producing a second or a millionth unit drops to near absolute zero?
What this dynamic introduces is a phenomenon termed the new economies of scale. In the physical marketplace, achieving economies of scale requires massive capital investment in massive factories. But in the market space, because the variable cost of creating continuous value using digital assets is near zero, incredibly small, agile companies can achieve astonishingly low unit costs.
Allowing a small team of developers to compete in global markets that were previously the exclusive domain of massive multinational corporations, it completely rebalances the economic forces of supply and demand.
It does. Consider a firm that invests the initial fixed cost to gather, organize, and synthesize a massive, definitive proprietary database of digital assets. For example, high-resolution digital schematics of every piece of industrial hardware currently in existence. Once that database is built, they can reharvest and repackage that exact same digital asset through an infinite number of highly profitable microtransactions.
Traditional competitors burdened by the costs of printing, binding, and shipping physical reference manuals cannot possibly match that pricing flexibility.
The virtual chain operates under a completely different, almost frictionless economic logic.
Okay, my mind is thoroughly expanded. We have rigorously deconstructed Porter's classic linear factory chain. We've explored the cyclical, problem-solving expertise of the shock, navigated the interconnected ecosystem of the network, and plunged into the infinite scalability and zero marginal cost reality of the virtual value chain. That deeply analytical exploration concludes the theoretical portion of our syllabus.
Excellent summary.
Now, let's aggressively pivot the session. The complex theory is laid out on the table. Now, let's look at exactly how you, as a manager listening to this right now, can actually execute a rigorous value analysis on your own business operations tomorrow morning. Let's move in part 2, the Pocket MBA Masterclass on Practical Application and Strategic Case Studies.
Let us transition from the academic realm into the operational. We're going to walk through a highly practical, step-by-step framework that synthesizes the notoriously complex, formal academic 9-step analysis process into a highly actionable 3-step approach designed specifically for busy managers. This streamlined methodology is drawn from the MindTools analysis framework.
Step 1 is straightforward but crucial: activity analysis.
In Step 1, your primary objective is to map the actual ground-level reality of your firm's operations, stripping away the idealized corporate charts. You must rigorously brainstorm and list every single discrete activity your firm undertakes that ultimately contributes to the final customer's experience. You must forcefully define the boundaries of your firm. Are you operating primarily as a transformative chain, a problem-solving shop, or a mediating network?
And once you decide, you must physically draw a flowchart of these activities, mapping the primary sequence and the supporting infrastructure accordingly. And the source material provides a fantastic, highly practical tip for this stage. Do not attempt to do this alone, isolated in your corner office.
A recipe for failure.
Bring your actual operational team into a room with a massive whiteboard. Doing this brainstorming with your team, rather than dictating it to them, creates immediate, powerful psychological buy-in. It ensures that you, sitting in management, don't miss the hidden, informal steps that actually keep the operation running.
A vital psychological point for effective change management. A strategy is useless if the team rejects the premise. Once the sprawling map of activities is physically drawn, we move to step 2, value analysis. This is where the rigorous quantification begins.
What are we quantifying?
Here, you must look at every single discrete activity box on your whiteboard map and ask 2 ruthless questions. What does executing this specific activity cost the firm, and what tangible value does it actually generate for the end customer? You need to benchmark these specific activities horizontally against competitors who are performing similar functions in the market. You must isolate and identify the specific underlying cost drivers for every single step.
But the text notes a massive hidden trap here that managers constantly fall into, right? It states that accurately evaluating cost versus value across a chain is notoriously difficult because of how traditional corporate accounting systems are structurally designed. Let's dig into that fiction.
It is a pervasive structural hurdle. Traditional corporate accounting systems are generally designed to track costs linearly, department by department, the marketing budget, the logistics budget, the manufacturing budget. These systems inherently assume that the subunits of a company act independently of one another. However, as we discussed earlier regarding Porter's model, true value chain analysis hinges entirely on recognizing and optimizing interdependencies.
Meaning, an action in one department drastically affects the reality of another?
Precisely. A manager optimizing purely based on a departmental ledger might reject a slightly more expensive, higher quality raw material in procurement to save the procurement department money. But that cheap material might cause massive machinery jams in operations, drastically lowering overall factory throughput and spiking post-sale warranty repair costs.
And the traditional accounting system just ignores that joint cross-departmental optimization. It hides the true strategic cost.
Therefore, a manager conducting a value analysis must look past the standard, siloed budget reports to model the true, interconnected strategic value relative to the cost of these linked activities.
You cannot just stare at a spreadsheet. You have to really dig into the friction points between departments. And crucially, you have to ask your actual customers what they truly care about, not just what your internal corporate metrics are designed to measure.
Quite right.
Once you have navigated that data gathering and understand the true cost-to-value ratio of your map, we hit the final stage. Step 3, evaluate and plan.
In this decisive final step, you review the comprehensive map, the true interrelated costs, and the actual value generated, and you begin to identify strategic opportunities for restructuring. You must make hard decisions regarding where to inject capital investment, which legacy activities to divest, what capabilities to aggressively develop internally, and crucially, what activities to outsource to the broader value system.
I want to deeply explore that specific make or buy outsourcing decision, because the text provides a remarkably elegant and powerful matrix for navigating this, based on Table 14.1. As a manager facing a sprawling map of activities, you evaluate every single activity on 2 distinct dimensions. First, how critical is this specific activity to our core competitive advantage? And second, what is our internal capability in performing this activity relative to the specialized open market?
It is a brutally clarifying framework. The logic dictates that if an activity is deemed highly critical to driving your competitive advantage, and you are currently more capable than others in the market at performing it, that activity is your strategic crown jewel. You must fiercely protect it, perform it internally, and continuously invest capital to develop it further.
And on the flip side,
Conversely, if an activity is not critical to your core advantage and you are quantifiably less capable or less efficient than specialized third-party vendors at performing it, the strategic mandate is absolute. You must outsource it.
stop wasting capital being mediocre at something the customer doesn't even buy you for. The text gives us a perfect, highly illustrative, real-world contrast here by examining the wildly divergent strategies of 2 highly successful global shoe companies, Nike and Ecco. Let's look at Ecco first.
Ah, yes. Ecco operates using a classic, highly traditional, fully vertically integrated value chain. Their corporate motto is literally, from cow to customer.
Wow.
They physically own the cattle farms, the chemical tanneries, the manufacturing facilities, the global logistics networks, and the brick-and-mortar retail stores. They keep almost every single primary and support activity strictly internal because their specific differentiation strategy dictates that total unyielding control over the entire physical chain is absolutely critical to maintaining their high-quality advantage.
It's a valid, though highly capital-intensive application of the framework. Now contrast that rigid vertical integration with the architecture of Nike. Through rigorous strategic analysis, Nike's management realized that physically stitching and manufacturing the shoe, the traditional core of a shoe company, is not actually their primary source of competitive advantage.
They do not view themselves as a traditional manufacturing chain. They view themselves much more as a hybrid of a value shop and a value network. Their critical, unassailable advantage lies in problem-solving athletic design, aggressive brand management, and orchestrating massive marketing networks.
Therefore, applying the Table 14.1 logic, physical manufacturing is not critical to their unique advantage, and highly specialized overseas factories are more capable of producing at scale at a lower cost.
Exactly. Because of this realization, Nike outsources over 85% of their raw material procurement and physical manufacturing to a vast network of international third parties. They recognized that owning the physical factories was not strategically critical, allowing them to free up billions in capital.
Which they redirect entirely into the activities that actually drive their premium pricing. Cutting-edge design, athlete endorsements, and brand cultivation. That is the outsourcing logic executed flawlessly at the highest corporate level.
It is indeed.
But I want to make sure this doesn't feel like an abstract exercise only for global CEOs. Let's bring this framework down to the micro level. How does a mid-level manager apply this exact same analysis to optimize their specific 10-person team? Let's walk through the highly relatable case study of Lakshmi, a software development manager.
Lakshmi manages a specialized team responsible for handling short, rapid software enhancements for various internal corporate clients. Recognizing inefficiencies and client frustration, she decides to lead her team through a micro-level value chain analysis. First, executing the activity analysis phase, she gathers her team around a whiteboard to map out their specific primary activities.
Because they operate essentially as an internal problem-solving value shop, their customized activity flow includes order taking, enhancement specification, resource scheduling, actual software development, programmer testing, secondary independent testing, final delivery, and post-delivery support.
Quite a sequence.
So they have the sequence of boxes drawn out on the whiteboard. Then, rather than trying to fix the whole system at once, they zoom in on just one specific box at the very beginning of the process, order taking. They ask themselves, what are the true value factors hidden inside this single step? When an internal client calls us to request a software fix, what does that client actually value during that initial phone call?
And through their collaborative brainstorming, separating their internal assumptions from the client's reality, the team identifies several key value drivers. They realize the client deeply values a very quick, immediate human response to incoming phone calls. Furthermore, the client highly values speaking to a team member who already possesses a baseline knowledge of the client's specific business unit and legacy systems.
So valuable time is not wasted explaining basic context.
Precisely. Finally, the client values an immediate, accurate understanding of their technical needs and the establishment of clear, reliable expectations regarding the delivery timetable.
So once they clearly define what the customer actually values, they move to the whiteboard's changes needed column. How do they structurally alter their daily operations to deliver that specific value? To solve the desire for immediate answers, they implement a simple zero-cost 3 rings rule. When the main line rings, everyone on the team is responsible and someone must physically answer the phone by the 3rd ring, no exceptions.
A brilliant, simple metric.
To ensure baseline knowledge of the client's business, they implement brief, regular team cross-training updates on various client departments and basic industry trends.
What is truly remarkable and highly instructive about Lakshmi's approach is the immediate, ground-level practicality. By performing this analysis collaboratively with her team, she bypasses the usual resistance to management mandates. She surfaces quick, essentially free operational wins, like the 3 rings rule.
Implementing these highly visible, easy changes immediately builds team momentum, agency, and enthusiasm. Having validated the methodology with a quick victory, The team can then systematically prioritize and tackle the vastly more complex systemic changes required in the heavier activity boxes down the line, such as completely overhauling the technical specification process or designing automated testing protocols.
Exactly. It takes high-level academic strategy and distills it into a highly effective Tuesday afternoon action plan that fundamentally improves the team's culture and output.
Now let's aggressively zoom back out. We've seen how this framework operates at the micro team level. What does this deep analysis look like when a company applies it to an entire sprawling macro system? The text provides a truly fascinating, expansive case study on the Nepalese poultry industry, specifically focusing on the strategic maneuvers of the Valley Group.
The Valley Group, initially operating in a highly constrained segment of the market, realized they needed to elevate their perspective. They looked beyond their own internal operational flowchart and meticulously mapped the entire complex value system of the Nepalese poultry industry. They mapped the flow of biological material and capital.
How does that system look?
The system begins with independent breeding farms, which supply day-old chicks to thousands of disparate independent farmers. These farmers require massive amounts of feed, supplied by separate feed mills. Once the poultry is mature, the complex logistics of processing begin, selling the meat to regional marts, and ultimately relying heavily on independent cold storage facilities to prevent catastrophic spoilage.
It is a massive, highly fragmented physical chain. And when the executives at Valley Group analyzed this entire overarching system, they were able to clearly identify massive strategic vulnerabilities and pinpoint exactly where the shifting profit pools were located.
Precisely. They recognized a structural reality. To secure a steady, high-quality, reliable supply of chicken, which was critical to their brand reputation, and to simultaneously capture the most lucrative profit margins scattered across the system, they could no longer remain an isolated entity operating in just one single, vulnerable segment.
So they utilized the insights from their value system analysis to aggressively execute a strategy of vertical integration. They started buying up the links in the chain.
They systematically integrated backward and forward along the value system. By strategically taking ownership and control over the breeding operations, the critical feed supply, and the highly sensitive processing and cold storage facilities, they fundamentally and structurally altered their competitive position within the entire Nepalese market.
They didn't just optimize their internal factory, they analyzed the entire macroeconomic chain to discover exactly where the real financial leverage and quality control resided, and they bought it. That is a masterclass in moving from analyzing a single firm's operations to dominating an entire industry ecosystem.
Indeed it is.
All right, we have rigorously covered the physical, tangible, practical applications of these frameworks. But earlier, we spent significant time discussing the zero marginal cost reality of the virtual value chain. How on earth do traditional managers take these physical operational steps and apply them to the chaotic digital market space?
The transition from the physical to the virtual is fraught with peril for legacy companies. The research by Rayport and Sviokla outlines 3 highly distinct, sequential stages of strategic adoption that managers must carefully navigate to execute the virtual value chain effectively. A firm cannot simply leap to the final stage, they must build the digital infrastructure. The first foundational stage is visibility.
Visibility. This sounds like merely using information technology to see what is already happening in your existing physical operations.
It is the necessary prerequisite for digital transformation. Before a manager can manipulate and extract value from the virtual world, they must possess the technological capability to accurately visualize their sprawling physical value chain as a single, integrated, real-time whole. The classic, highly illustrative case study here is Frito-Lay in the mid-1990s.
The potato chip company.
Yes. Managing a massive, highly perishable physical inventory distributed to tens of thousands of individual retail locations is a logistical nightmare. To gain control, Frito-Lay invested heavily in equipping their massive fleet of field employees, the delivery drivers, with highly specialized, rugged handheld digital devices.
Keep in mind, this is 1995. This is well before smartphones. This was a massive capital expenditure to put a computer in every truck. And the goal was to relentlessly collect granular, store-by-store inventory levels, daily sales velocity, and incredibly specific competitor pricing data.
And crucially, all of that granular, localized data was fed back daily into a massive, centralized corporate database. Frito-Lay built an incredibly sophisticated digital central nervous system for a purely physical business. They did not initially change the physical recipe of the potato chips or the physical mechanics of the delivery trucks.
But by executing the first stage visibility, they gained unprecedented real-time analytical clarity into their inventory flow, complex logistics, and shifting consumer demand across the entire nation.
This visibility allowed them to coordinate their physical manufacturing and routing actions with a level of incredible precision that their blind competitors simply could not match.
Okay, so stage one is using data gathering to illuminate the physical world clearly. Once you have that digital nervous system in place, what is stage two?
Stage 2 is termed mirroring capability. This is where the digital transition becomes truly transformative to the firm's cost structure. In this stage, having achieved total visibility, companies begin explicitly substituting virtual digital activities for highly expensive, time-consuming physical ones. They essentially create a parallel functional value chain entirely within the market space.
So instead of executing a process in the real world with steel and plastic, you execute it in a simulated computer environment. The text uses the engineering giants Ford and Boeing as perfect examples here. Let's delve into the friction they were facing before this digital shift.
Consider the traditional physical value chain of automotive engineering. Prior to mirroring, if Ford wanted to design a new vehicle, teams of engineers would draft massive physical blueprints, build highly expensive clay models, physically crash test actual prototypes, and rely on mail systems to share designs with global teams. It was agonizingly slow and incredibly capital-intensive.
And then they shifted.
When Ford developed the Global Contour sedan, they fundamentally shifted their process. They didn't just build faster physical prototypes. They moved the entire core of their product development value chain entirely into the market space, utilizing highly advanced CAD/CAM computer-aided design and manufacturing global networks.
This meant that an engineering team in Detroit could be working on the digital engine schematic during the day. And when they went home, a team in Germany could instantly open that exact same digital file and continue refining the transmission housing. They created a perfectly mirrored, simulated computer environment, allowing global teams to work simultaneously 24 hours a day, entirely bypassing the massive physical limitations of time, geography, and physical materials.
A profound acceleration of the development cycle. Similarly, Boeing adopted mirroring capability to revolutionize aerospace engineering. Historically, designing a new jet engine required spending years and millions of dollars constructing incredibly precise physical scale models and testing them in massive, power-hungry physical wind tunnels to analyze aerodynamic flow. It was a massive bottleneck.
So they skipped the wind tunnel entirely.
In a manner of speaking, yes. Boeing shifted to testing these complex new engine designs using incredibly sophisticated computational fluid dynamics simulations. They performed critical, highly complex, value-adding engineering steps in a virtual world that perfectly mirrored physical aerodynamic reality, but they executed it at a mere fraction of the time and capital cost.
They replaced physical steel and wind with pure math and processing power. That brings us to stage three, which is the ultimate, highly lucrative goal of digital transformation: new customer relationships. The text refers to this stage as the creation of a value matrix, where every single step of your newly established virtual chain can suddenly spin off brand new, highly profitable digital products and services.
In this final stage, managers look at the massive flow of organized information circulating within their virtual value chain, and they realize that the data itself is the product. They draw on this data to proactively deliver value to customers in entirely new, unprecedented ways. The text highlights the insurance giant USIA as a fascinating entity operating at this stage. Fundamentally, USIA does not manufacture any physical goods. They operate as a highly sophisticated, trusted information intermediary within the market space.
They utilize the massive trove of data they constantly gather from their network of customers, their deeply integrated virtual value chain, to anticipate life events, constantly cross-sell relevant financial products, and fulfill newly emerging needs before the customer even articulates them. If their data indicates a customer just had a child, they don't just wait. They proactively offer life insurance or a college savings plan.
It sets a highly specific digital demand based on their behavioral data, and they instantly source the digital supply. They have created a massive, highly profitable matrix of value entirely constructed upon a foundation of customer information, analytics, and deep trust.
The meticulous management and synthesis of that digital information has evolved to become their central corporate activity and the absolute primary source of their formidable competitive advantage. To truly drive this paradigm shift home, let's look at how fully exploiting the virtual value chain can completely, and sometimes violently, reinvent an entire legacy industry. Let's return to the scenario I opened the show with. Let's talk about the collision of the music business with the digital market space. The text provides a fascinating analysis of Geffen Records.
It serves as a textbook, historical example of the brutal collision between a deeply entrenched physical chain and a disruptive virtual entrant. As we discussed, the traditional highly physical value chain of a major label like Geffen involves a massive sequential infrastructure,
Yeah.
discovering bands in physical venues, auditing them in highly capitalized physical studios, painstakingly editing physical master tapes, manufacturing millions of physical CDs, and orchestrating complex physical distribution logistics.
It is a machine designed to control physical scarcity. And the text notes they were suddenly facing an existential threat from virtual digital upstarts, specifically highlighting early groups like IUMA, the Internet Underground Music Archive. These digital pioneers created a platform that allowed unknown independent bands to post highly compressed digital audio tracks directly to a global network.
A technological shift that completely subverts and bypasses the traditional gatekeeping role of the major record label. The new economic realities of the market space dictate that musicians can now record digitally, distribute globally, and immediately test consumer reactions to their music for absolute pennies, entirely bypassing the massive, capital-intensive fiscal infrastructure that legacy labels relied upon for their power.
So facing this digital subversion, how does a legacy giant like Geffen strategically adapt to survive? They are forced to manage two entirely different value chains simultaneously. They have to keep shipping the physical CDs while rapidly building out their virtual presence. They begin by constructing a web showroom. They start systematically releasing free digital samples to build network buzz.
But the tech suggests a truly innovative matrix strategy. They could extract entirely new revenue streams by allowing fans to pay a subscription to sit in on live virtual studio sessions via the internet. They can take the raw, digital exhaust of their physical recording process, the discarded outtakes, the rough, unpolished acoustic mixes, the candid studio banter, and package it as a brand new, highly desirable digital product for superfans operating entirely in the market space.
It is a brilliant strategic pivot. They are actively applying the 5 virtual steps we discussed: gather, organize, select, synthesize, distribute, to the massive amount of data generated by their existing physical processes. By doing so, they create an entirely new matrix of low-cost revenue opportunities. They do not merely attempt to incrementally improve the efficiency of their physical chain, they aggressively exploit a newly constructed virtual chain running parallel to it.
And our final case study perfectly illustrates the ultimate complete reinvention of a physical business model into a purely digital powerhouse, Image Technology International.
Oh, this one's fascinating.
Yes. The strategic brilliance of Image Technology is that they enter the highly competitive, physically constrained commercial imaging market, not by attempting to engineer marginally better liquid chemicals or slightly faster physical photo paper, but by adopting an entirely digital market space approach from inception. Their core foundational process is the high-resolution digitization of physical photographs.
And because they are operating under the law of digital assets we discussed earlier, the reality that a digital file is never consumed upon use, once they possess that high-resolution digital photograph, they can leverage that exact same digital asset in a million different highly profitable ways. They can instantly format it for a cheap newsprint flyer, output it in high resolution to a digital CD-ROM catalog, or seamlessly integrate it into a dynamic video presentation.
Precisely the point. They did not just create a slightly more efficient physical sequence for processing film. They fundamentally reinvented the underlying business model of the industry by capturing and controlling the ultimate digital asset. Once they organize a massive, definitive, easily searchable database of these digital images, they possess an intellectual property asset that costs essentially zero to replicate or transmit.
This allows them to effortlessly parlay that single asset across countless shifting media formats and customer demands. They strategically shifted the entire basis of competition in their industry away from the messy, physical logistics of chemical processing and physical delivery, and firmly rooted it in the infinitely scalable management and instant distribution of digital information.
A remarkable transformation.
Wow. We have covered an absolutely immense, incredibly dense amount of strategic ground during this session. Let's take a moment to try and synthesize the journey we've just taken.
Certainly. We began our analysis by rigorously deconstructing Michael Porter's foundational value chain framework. We examined the sequential, highly physical assembly line of primary and support activities, recognizing how they must be deliberately orchestrated to drive either a strategy of ruthless cost leadership or highly tailored differentiation. We then acknowledge the inherent limitations of forcing that manufacturing model onto the service sector, exploring stable and field-stead's alternative configurations. Specifically, the bespoke, iterative, problem-solving logic of the value shop and the highly complex, simultaneous, interconnected logic of the value network. Finally, we transcended the constraints of the physical realm entirely, diving deeply into Rayport and Stjoklas's architecture of the virtual value chain. We analyzed how operating in the market space offers the staggering potential of infinite scalability and near-zero marginal costs through the strategic mastery of indestructible digital assets. We then grounded all of this high-level theory in practical, operational execution, demonstrating exactly how managers can apply activity mapping, rigorous value analysis, and strategic outsourcing matrices to optimize both micro-level teams and massive macro-industry systems.
That is the perfect, comprehensive, high-level recap. Now, before we officially sign off, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final, highly provocative strategic challenge to mull over. This thought experiment is drawn directly from a fundamental critique of traditional value chain analysis found deeply embedded in our text today. If you look at traditional value chain analysis, the classic 1985 Porter model, it structurally places the customer at the absolute very end of the line. The internal factory conceptualizes the product, makes the product, ships the product, and the customer merely sits at the end of the outbound logistics chain, passively receiving whatever finished good the firm decided to produce.
A very push-oriented model.
Right. But deeply consider the highly connected digital era we live in right now. What happens to your firm's competitive advantage when you are forced to reverse that chain entirely? Imagine a market reality where your customers utilize direct digital feedback loops, hyper-connected social media networks, and specialized digital platforms to loudly dictate exactly what highly customized product they want, exactly how they want it designed, and exactly when they want it delivered. In this scenario, your firm only mobilizes its physical operations to produce what has already been conceptually sold in the market space.
That represents a profound, fundamental inversion of the traditional industrial model. It shifts the firm from a strategy of make and sell to a strategy of sense and respond.
It changes the entire architecture of the firm. So here is your defining question to analyze as a modern manager heading into the office tomorrow. Is your legacy value chain, your specific operational team, your specialized professional shop, or your sprawling communication network truly flexible enough to run backward?
A vital, potentially existential question for long-term strategic survival.
Thank you so much for investing your time and joining us for this highly rigorous session of the Pocket MBA. We sincerely hope you take these analytical frameworks, grab your team and a whiteboard, and start aggressively applying these tools to dissect and rebuild your own firm strategy tomorrow morning. We will see you in the next class.